one of those seasons where you lose one game all year, and it's the national championship. But
Oh
that will
no.
always hurt. Yeah, that was still hard when my club did a goalie lesson, and you would think they would give you the basics, but they taught me how to slide tackle. And I don't know why that's what we spent so much time on when I'm like, I've never played goalie before, but that's what we did. And so the car was pretty much upside down, and I was kind of stuck there. Wasn't able to get the seatbelt undone, so just kind of hanging there for a while. I come to Saturdays not just to play hockey. That community piece, seeing the friends, seeing that is there.
All right, here we go. Episode number 21. This is a Pride and Puck podcast. I'm Andrew McDougall. Madeleine Cho, how are you?
I'm good. I'm happy to be here and see what started as Instagram stories and posts and become a real thing.
I hope I got your name correctly because I forgot to ask you before we came on. It's one of the things I usually ask a guest.
No, you got it, but with hockey and sports, so you can go Cho, you can go Mads, you can go Maddie. It's pretty much anything but my first name.
Yeah, I feel that as well. I get that a fair bit. I'll probably hit those different names throughout the podcast. Maybe we can make sure we get all of them. You're in Toronto. Has it started snowing heavily yet, or not really?
No, it has been warm. Warm for me. Like people will be in like a winter jacket, and I'm wearing my t-shirt out. But it's been pretty nice.
Yeah, I've got some friends who are traveling in Ottawa at the moment, and they put up a story. They were hoping for some snow, and I don't think it's happened quite yet.
No. Sucks for the visitors, but we're happy.
Yeah. Are you a cyclist?
I have bikes.
Okay.
Yeah, like I did. It was a thing that I did for kind of quite a bit, commuting wise, and with injuries and things like that. I haven't been recently with other injuries.
Okay. Because I've seen a couple of your posts on Instagram cycling, and I was pretty happy because I'm a bit of a cyclist. So when I was seeing it on there, I was like, yes, I've got a cyclist on the podcast.
Yeah, no, I am a fan. It's I've just kind of been out of it with like knee injuries and things like that, and then winter comes and I don't bother kind of getting my bike back out there.
Yeah. It's always depending on weather for me. If it's too cold or windy, I just okay, I'll just stay home. You grew up in Vancouver. What was that like growing up in Vancouver?
Yeah, I had been really lucky with kind of my experience growing up. My grew up with my parents, my older brother. We're all super close, and I did French immersion, so we also kind of had a very small group through like elementary school and into high school. So even though I've been in Toronto for 12 years now, um, we're already messaging to like go back and see all my high school friends. We get together every time I'm home. So that was great, and I got the opportunity to play, like ice hockey, ringette, field hockey, and really just kind of explore a bunch of opportunities. Yeah.
Did you I thought about this before you came on. Did you run into many Australians in Vancouver? Because it's on the West Coast. A lot of Australians seem to travel to Vancouver, and I have been told that I haven't been to Vancouver yet, but I have been told that it's a lot like where I'm from in Melbourne.
Yeah, it is definitely not, the winter Canadian city that so many people think it is, or the big city that people think it is. But there's definitely a lot of Australians that go to Whistler, and that's the actual mountain with the snow. But yeah, no, there's a few. Yeah.
Um, you told me before we came on a story of you're a goalie before anything else you said to me, but I sort of had a laugh, and then I thought to myself when you told me this, I thought, oh, maybe I shouldn't laugh at this. But your first your first memory of sport was playing goalie in soccer, um, and getting smashed in the face with the ball. And I wasn't sure if I should laugh or not.
Hey, I made the save. I was, maybe like 4. This is when I was living in Edmonton for a couple of years. Yeah, it was like co-ed little children's soccer. And yeah, I just remember getting a ball to the face, but I made the save, and that was, I was happy with that.
And you've had a phenomenal, like a really amazing field hockey career. Um, is that something that you thought you would ever play growing up?
Uh, and not really, or at least not to the extent that I did. Obviously, hockey, ice field hockey, is big in Australia. I played a couple like high school teams that came over to Vancouver actually. Um, but I started playing when I was young. It's a lot bigger out in BC and Vancouver than it is in Toronto. And I played a couple years, and then student. Then we had you had to wear skirts, uh, and I wasn't really that interested. And prior to that, there weren't goalies, so like I just didn't connect with the sport. So I quit and focused on ice hockey and ringette. And then it was only in high school, a ringette teammate was like, "Hey, we don't have a goalie. Can you come play?" And I'm like, "I get to wear hockey pants and I get to be goalie. Sounds good. Like that sounds right up my alley." Yeah, and then ended up, playing on the regional team that year and was selected to the provincial team. Um, and then that was the first time playing really competitively, and I was like, this is a lot of fun. I enjoyed playing the sport, and it was great. And then I was like, oh, this is another level of like competition and engagement and experience. And kind of from that point on, I was like, let's play a little more competitively and put a bit more into sports in general.
Was there a certain moment playing field hockey that you thought, "Oh, I really love this"? Was there a certain game or certain moment that you when you were playing?
It was really that first year. It was the last year that Vancouver like had our own regional team, and the next age year up, we like joined with 2 other cities. Um, and so I didn't know what I was doing. My club did a goalie lesson, and you would think they would give you the basics, but they taught me how to slide tackle. And I don't know why that's what we spent so much time on when I'm like, I've never played goalie before, but that's what we did. And Vancouver was not a great regional team at all. I think we lost every game, but I had so many breakaways and everything. So I just got to like run around, do everything, like took out players. So I was like, this is really fun. Um, and pretty much like kind of from there, it was like, okay, this is a good time. I got yelled at pretty much the rest of my career and into university to like stay in my net a bit. But yeah, that was entertaining, a little bit of like legal Ron Hextall style, but on the field.
Has field hockey grown a fair bit over the last sort of 10 years, do you think?
Yeah, I've seen the growth in Ontario. Um, yeah, for a long time, it's Ontario's been it's a late entry sport in general with field hockey, it kind of coming in high school. But it's definitely grown a lot in terms of the junior program and the provincial program in Ontario. Vancouver, it's always been big. We've I think in West Vancouver, which is a different city for anyone who doesn't know Vancouver. Vancouver, North Van, and West Van are different. But I think they had one of the largest clubs in North America. So always been big there, but it's really grown in Toronto, which is nice to see.
And you're playing ice hockey, field hockey, ringette. Can you explain to people, because a lot of people in Australia might not know what ringette is?
Okay. Yeah, so it was created actually in Ontario, and it looks similar to ice hockey. It's played on the ice. You can pretty much wear the same equipment if you want, but instead of a hockey stick, it's a straight stick and a rubber ring. So it's on the ice, and you just put your stick in the ring to move it around and control it. We wear the little triangle cages so that the straight stick doesn't go right into our eye. So that's kind of one of the main differences. And then you have to pass over the blue lines. So when I've had teammates go like from ice hockey to ringette or ringette to ice hockey, it's offside is the most confusing thing for them. Ringette players are always offside. Hockey players skate over the blue line. It's entertaining to watch them try and like learn opposite rules. And then as a goalie, no one's allowed into the crease. It's about like a foot and a half larger than the ice hockey crease. And my left hand, instead of using a trapper, I use it's kind of like a blocker, but it has just like a glove on it because I have to throw the ring. So that's kind of like the biggest difference for me as a goalie. Um, but it's the best skaters, even hockey players will say it. The best skaters come for ringette. It's super fast. And in terms of like the play style, because you can only have three people from each team kind of in the end space from the face-off circles in, it's 3-on-3. So it moves around like basketball in terms of the cycling and picks and everything, or box lacrosse if you know that. It's my parents' favorite sport of the three that I've played for sure. Yeah, it's I love it. Like it's yeah, I still get happy and excited kind of when I think about it or getting to introduce people to the sport. And it's like it's so great. You need to play.
And you're playing three sports um, growing up, and you mentioned that you couldn't believe that your parents let you play three sports. How much have your parents played a role in your sporting career? They've obviously probably given up a lot of time driving you around to different places.
Yeah, it was everything. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how I kind of got that out of them. And like my poor mom, I say that any anxiety or anything I should have felt as a goalie just got immediately transferred to my mom, and I was fine. And she was just a nervous wreck on the side of the game watching me play, or not being able to watch me play, as has happened a couple times in like big games. Um, but yeah, like they never pressured me. Like that was kind of the last thing on their mind, I think, to think that like their kids would play any sports competitively. It was be active, join sports and try things out. And then just kind of, went off from there. And so, all the extra goalie sessions, private sessions, club teams, tournament teams. And then, yeah, like Vancouver, like I said, we don't aren't great for women's sports, at least when I was playing, or girls' sports. Um, so often I was having to play like in a different city because we didn't have enough players or we didn't have a rep team. So I was having to travel a lot for that. Yeah, it was they kind of gave everything their time, finances, three sets of goal equipment. Um, yeah, so I'm really kind of grateful for that.
And your field hockey career just continued to take off, and eventually you were recruited to the University of Toronto. Can
Yeah,
you talk us through that? How daunting was it? But also, how exciting were you?
yeah, I think it was kind of something by like grade 10. I was really kind of thinking about grade 9, but then I fractured my pelvis at the end of grade 9 and in field hockey, and kind of doing that rehab and then having to stop and rehab again the next year for it. I kind of missed out on the prime time to recruit down to the US. Um, yeah, I had a couple of places, and so that's really kind of where the initial focus was. Um, but then it's like, well, can you pay for a year of tuition? And it's like, absolutely not. I cannot afford international tuition to a US school. No. Um, but out of kind of the Canadian school, like U of T still competed just as much with that. And yeah, my mom grew up just outside of Toronto in Guelph, so I had some family here and had that connection. Um, and once, yeah, that kind of just started to become a reality that like I could go here, then that became, I don't even think I finished other university applications. Yeah, it was like, okay, whatever happens, like I'm gonna end up at U of T. Yeah, and it just kinda I don't know, it's I didn't have great marks. I did not do great in school. I didn't get into the program that I wanted to at U of T, and so it was literally 2 weeks before preseason. They're like, "Hey, we got you into, like, the Scarborough campus for humanities, so pack up and move. Let's go." So, yeah, it was, not your typical, you're excited after high school, ready to go that summer. It was kind of a bit of a stressful summer. But yeah, no, it was exciting to get to move out here.
And you mentioned your pelvis. It seems like through your journey, injuries are sort of a bit of a common theme. Um, how tough was it to finally get over some injuries when you're at the university?
Yeah, it was I was really kind of hoping to be a fresh start. I came in with an ankle issue, and then our first day of preseason in our fitness testing, I tore a hamstring. Didn't realize it and played for a couple days. But yeah, so that was kind of my intro. Thankfully, we already had two goalies, so I was gonna redshirt likely anyway, so that worked out. But yeah, that was kind of like a hard shift into that, and then even having surgery on my ankle after my first year, so that kind of just kept going. But then also, kind of dealing with that and living on my own, and just having those stressors and the transition to university. Um, Kind of in in high school is kind of when kind of some like disordered eating stuff started, around coping really specifically with the injuries I had in high school. And then once I moved out to Toronto, I was living on my own, off campus, uh, dealing with the injuries, not able to play. So that's kind of when it really fully kind of developed into an eating disorder at that point.
Um, were you still playing ice hockey at the same time as you were doing field hockey, or was it completely
No,
no sport at all?
no. So I stopped kind of playing anything on the ice, during those few years of playing varsity. One, because I had injuries often enough that I was kind of out, and also knowing how many injuries I kind of had, then it was limiting the extra sports that I didn't need in terms of like actually training or cross training kind of thing. Yeah, so I was mostly off the ice for those years.
In the eating disorder, um, how hard was that to sort of navigate through? Did someone sort of approach you? They might have seen something different in you, or was it within yourself that you finally sort of seek treatment?
Yeah, no one knew, no one said anything. It was very isolated to kind of just coping with the injuries. So when I was playing, on a game weekend, tournaments, preseason, things kind of were just fine. Um, yeah, and at no point did anyone, flag anything. And even when I like reached out for help at one point, was super dismissive over it. I didn't fit their what their box was of what it should look like. Um, yeah, so it was I was lucky to have people who understood eating disorders who I'd kind of talked to and were able to counter, those dismissive voices and invalidating kind of experiences that may have just completely pushed me away from pursuing kind of treatment or recovery or anything like that. Um, but yeah, that was probably still one of the hardest things is knowing that I did it from like a rational understanding that I needed to be in recovery to be able to play my best. Um, yeah.
And sports seems like it plays a massive role in your life, obviously, from mental health to physical health. Um, and there was a time where you got back to playing that you mentioned to me just before Christmas, and you realized that you enjoyed how much you enjoyed playing. Um, how much does that how much um, does playing sport feed into just living a happy life, I suppose, in a physical and mental sense.
Yeah, it's that relationship. I've been playing sports for pretty much my whole life. Been playing my current sports for 20 years now, and recently that relationship has shifted into a much more positive space. Sports were just kind of like I love playing. That was it was great. It was fun, but that was kind of where it ended. It wasn't like, oh, I need to, being on the ice is my escape from high school or anything like that. And part of it is once high school came around and I was kind of focusing on more, I also had injuries and all these other setbacks that kind of brought stress to the sports. And then same once I came to university, injuries and impacts on that. But it's only, over the summer that I realized like, oh, this is like a thing that I need in my life. It was actually coursework. I'm doing my bachelor of kinesiology, and a lot of these courses have been really interesting to go into and being able to apply to my life. And so for our positive psychology course, I looked back on kind of the role sport played in like managing and recovering from like the trauma. I had PTSD. I had a car accident back in 2014, which was kind of eventually the end of my varsity and kind of competitive career. Um, but I realized once I was kind of like studying it very academically, like, oh wow, you're hitting me in the emotions right now, and I should be in class. Like this is schoolwork. I shouldn't be so emotional over it. Um, but yeah, I realized like that space of being able to have one thing in my life that had some control that I was good at, and kind of had some success in, and then having those friendships and those relationships on the team that I was just talking to my therapist at the start of the year, being like, if I lose sports now, like that's going to be a huge struggle because now it's become more than just something I like. It's become, an important part of my, mental health and my coping mechanism. And that's like amazing to have. It's really nice that sport can play this role, but it's also pretty scary and like, okay, well now what happens if I lose it? Because, I'm a veteran when it comes to rehab, but if I get injured again, then that's, it feels like a different experience. So it's nice, and also it's like, all right, well, we have something else to work on in therapy.
Is that maybe partially a reason why you've got into coaching as well to keep you in sport?
Yeah, I've always loved coaching and working with kids since high school. So I've coached since high school, and it is something where like I really stepped away from field hockey once kind of things just ended unexpectedly with the accident and everything that went down there. That I I had a really bad relationship with the sports and everything that had kind of happened. And it was just summer last year that I ended up starting to coach the juniors for my club, and I was like, okay, this is, they got me out to the field, they got me back into the sport, and I was really able to appreciate that. And this past summer, getting to goalie coach again, um, and that really brought back that passion for it. That I was like, okay, even if I couldn't play, I realized that that's still that involvement in sport in a different way. Um, Definitely, kind of fills at least a part of it. For sure. There's sometimes it also hits and you're like, oh, I really just want to be out there with them. I see how much they're loving it, and I remember how much I loved it getting to play.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I didn't have the opportunity to coach, it would be definitely worse of an experience.
And you did mention the accident that you had. It's not over the top to say that you're probably lucky to be alive today. Can you talk us through the accident and how lucky you were that someone came along at the certain time that you were there?
Yeah, so uh, this was I had just finished my first season as starting goalie with U of T. We had won our Ontario kind of conference championship and came second at nationals. One of those seasons where you lose one game all year, and it's the national championship. But
Oh
that will
no!
always hurt. Yeah, yeah, that was still a hard one. And I was just talking to a teammate from then, and we are like, yeah, it still hurts. Uh, and totally sidetracked here, but and then we were talking about the next day. I get a pop up on my Facebook because I have friends who were on UBC and coached, and so they're doing their positive. It's been 10 years since we won
No!
nationals post. I was like, no, I need to get off. I'm gonna have to block them all like at this time of year all the time. But yeah, so that was it. Had just finished, and then I had to drop my classes, and 2 weeks later I started a day hospital eating disorder treatment program. And then 2 weeks into that, I was driving back to Toronto from a work event on the 401 on our main highway, and uh, lost control and went off the side of the road onto the shoulder, and it kind of went off. There was a bit of like a hill on the side, and so it ramped up off of that and rolled onto its top, and it went about, I don't know, 30 feet, about 7 feet up in the air, and came down into some trees. And so at that point, it was kind of late on a Saturday night, and late November and a pretty quiet stretch of the highway, and no one saw, and the way it was kind of positioned in the trees, no one could see it as, most people are going 140 down the 401 if anyone knows it. Yeah, so no one could see me, and so the car was pretty much upside down, and I was kind of stuck there. Wasn't able to get the seatbelt undone, so just kind of hanging there for a while. And yeah, and I moved and I went, my left side, my ribs are definitely injured and broken. It was one of the most painful things I've ever had. Um, and so I was really just kind of like, okay, let's not move my left side. I don't want to, maybe risk puncturing a lung. And my mom went, "That's what you thought about as you're there?" I'm like, "I'm a kin student. This is like, that's in my mind. It goes, okay, let's do an assessment. Can I feel four limbs? Uh, you know, do I have a concussion? Because if I got another concussion, my career was pretty much over, which it ended up being anyway. But that's also again where I went with sports. I was like, can I still play? Um, yeah, and then I was like, okay, we have to. So I went into this really, rational mind, and that's something that comes from my sports. Like I said, I've always been a goalie. That's who I am, and I think that came pretty naturally, and the mindset that it takes to be a goalie. And so it's kind of what I call my goalie mind. It really developed pretty organically, and it's just the idea of I have to be focused on the next shot, keeping a level head, so not getting really upset if I get scored on, but also not getting really excited if we score because maybe we tie it with 30 seconds left. I have to be on. I can't be overexcited during those next 30 seconds. Um, and so being able to enter into that space was great. So there was a moment of panic when the car landed, which fair. And I just went, this isn't helpful. Um, so then yeah, I just kind of you know kept my level head and just went into that really rational assessment, everything, keeping track of the time. The seatbelt was cutting into like one leg, so I was like, okay, let's make sure we rotate so that like flow and everything's going between both legs. Like super super rational approach to it all. Um, and then yeah, so I was conscious for about an hour. Was out of it, unconscious for about an hour. Um, and there was one point during it where I was just like, okay, like I can just hear the cars going past, and I'm like, okay, no one can hear me or no one can see me. Um, I maybe just going to be stuck here till morning, and kind of just having to accept that piece, and being like, I don't know if there is something more internal, like what's going to happen. So again, that was kind of fair, a point of emotion, which still is like someone who's always been rational and not loving feeling things. It's like, oh, why did I feel that? Working on that. Um, and then yeah, when I kind of came to, it was about 2 hours later, I was eventually able to kind of get myself out of the seatbelt, and crawl out. I'm pretty sure it was the sunroof. Everything on the driver's side was kind of crunched down, so I'm pretty sure it was the sunroof. I crawled out and kind of down this little hill, to the shoulder. And yeah, and no one could see me as they're driving past again, at like 1:30, 1:40. Now it's like midnight on a Saturday. So I was like, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to like walk up to this on ramp or something. And I like turn to do it, and this car immediately pulls over as it's coming down the on ramp. I'm like, oh yes, perfect. And then it turns out to be a cop who was going to set up a speed trap. And I was like, saves me a call even because I also don't have my phone, so it's somewhere in the car. Um, yeah, so that was nice. Yeah, he was. I kind of found out later that his partner would have missed me by like minutes because they were leaving, and then he was like, "Ah, shoot, I forgot my jacket," and went back in to get it. And so like that small little delay kind of brought him there. Uh, but I did shock him. He did was not expecting that to walk up on someone walking on the side of the road with one shoe on. And then when he asked, like, have you been drinking all day? I'm like, no. And he's like, is there anyone else here? Like, like, should we be aware? I'm like, there's just a Mr. Peanuts in the back of the car. That's it. And I think I lost all credibility at that point, even though I was telling the truth, because I was coming back from a mascot gig, for a Christmas parade. So there was literally a giant Mr. Peanut in the back of my car. Um, but yeah, I probably could have been a little more specific or just not mention that. But yeah. yeah, so yeah, I don't think he trusted me on any point after that.
When you tell people this story, do people not believe you? Because it's like something that you would see in a Hollywood movie script. Um, you climbing out of the car. It's amazing.
Uh, I think for the people who know me, they're kind of like, such a Madeleine Cho way to deal with it. Um, yeah, so I don't think that, like, really surprises, the people closest to me. But then also, I'm pretty comfortable, and I've shared this story, different aspects of it through mental health advocacy. I did a podcast um, over COVID with the like a Asian goalie podcast and spoke about it and goalie mind and stuff. So I'm very open and comfortable with the story. That sometimes it takes the fresh eyes to realize the reality of it. Um, and so for me, I had a hard time with the accident um, because, in a way, I kind of blame going to treatment for having the accident and then the accident taking away my sports. So I really had this hard relationship with it and kind of accepting where things went with it. And then I started seeing a new therapist in April, and so we were kind of going over my history, and she does like EMDR and trauma work. So we were kind of like, maybe we're gonna work through a couple things that are left over there. Um, and I kind of, as I went through it and was like kind of thinking about it to present to her, I was like, oh, this was actually a big thing. Like it's and going back, I've seen the pictures a million times and don't really think about it. And then I was like looking at it through fresh eyes, kind of picturing what her perspective is, and I was like, yeah, like this is I was very lucky, which I've kind of always known, but I think after a point kind of take for granted amongst like everything else talking about it. So yeah, sometimes you need that reminder of like, oh right, that was we talk about traumas or we talk about, mental health and all these struggles, and then you're like, oh, if you're not in it, like things can, that is something substantial. Yeah, so I have had those responses, but like I said, I think the people closest to me are not surprised by the way I handled it, um, and kind of managed to get myself out and all of that. Um, but yeah, it is, and this is 10 years on, and I'm only just in a way kind of accepting like, like this is lucky, and taking advantage of the opportunity I have now, and just accepting that.
Yeah, it's an incredible story of survival. It really is. You did mention goalie mind, and that was something that fascinated me. Um, can you talk us through, I suppose, the essence of where it come from, and what sort of things that you do with goalie mind to, I suppose, even elevate that to continually get better at the position?
Yeah, so it really, yeah, kind of started organically. And I think about this because, if I'm at a tournament or something, and there's the 7-year-old kid who's just getting shelled, and they're crying after the eighth goal against them, and they're super upset. If I can find like a parent or coach, be like, does this kid even want to be a goalie? Like, are they just it's unlucky this was their time on the rotation playing against the top team, or like, do they want to do this?
Yeah,
Um, so if they're like, "Oh, no," like they wanna like, they really wanna play in net, um, then, I'll usually try and, just, like, talk to them after the game, be like, like, "This is just kind of it, and the sport and the position," and just try and, like, one of the young kids lack goalie training in general, but that mental side of things and that mindset piece is definitely missing, so just trying to, build that in them and not have them, kind of give up on the position because, that is part of the reality of the sport. Doesn't matter what level you're at. Um, and so I was fortunate to be able to kind of just handle that relatively well at a young age. Um, and then yeah, that just kind of continued as I got more competitive. Just this piece of like it's expanded from like, okay, just be ready for the next shot and like get through this game. And then it'd be like, it's a tournament. So just keep a level head through. It doesn't matter what happens in this game because we just have to pay attention and worry about the next game. And then the tournament will be over. It's like, okay, great. And then that spread to all season long. Like, it doesn't matter what happens this game, just focus on the next game, next game, next game, and just keeping this kind of really level head. And then everything would, either tears of joy at the end of the season or like tears of sorrow of everything. And, it's not the healthiest way. And that mindset eventually pushed kind of outside of the season and outside of sports just into my world and kind of built this belief around, if I feel these emotions, then, in sports, I won't be ready for the next shot. They'll score, we'll lose, to if I, feel these emotions, I'm going to get overwhelmed, not able to, maybe do my schoolwork tonight and work on that assignment and won't be able to hand it in tomorrow. Like, so it really blew up in not so helpful way. And so that's something, I'm grateful it got me through the accident. It's I can only imagine if I didn't have that piece. Um, I was really fortunate that, from the PTSD, the flashbacks were really isolated to, those few moments where those emotions came through. And I can only, how much worse it would be if that whole 2-hour span was kind of that heightened emotion, um, and having to cope and process and go through all that. Um, but at the same time, it meant that I was really kind of missing out on some of the best parts of sports. And so that's also something now when I think about coaching kids and working with them and that mindset of making sure they develop this healthy relationship to emotion, so they can enjoy the sport and enjoy, those wins. I'll never be, like Flurry on the ice and joking and laughing and like I just can't play in that space. Um, but like you should be able to celebrate when you win, a semifinals and not just be nothing matters until the final and keep a level head. Um, but that's also been something very recently through therapy and beer league and the community that's kind of there that I've been able to engage with that more. Um, yeah, it's not always the most fun in therapy. I'm like, um, but it's definitely kind of important. Um, and there was a fear, I'm only playing beer league of like, okay, like how much can I feel in a game, and it's not going to cost me. Because I'm still competitive. I still want to play well.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that was I remember the first game we scored with like 2 minutes left, to tie it, and then with like a minute left, we score to go ahead. And I'm just standing in my net, and I just see like my glove comes up and like a fist pump, and I was like, "What just happened? like what is whose hand is this?" Like that's how kind of like far goalie mind had went in my life. And so for like that, like just a natural response of like celebration to a goal, like that was so uncomfortable for me. And I was like, therapy win, but I hated it too. Um, yeah, like that's kind of to the extent it went. But playing in my current league, that's where that happened. And those relationships and community is what's allowed that to, be challenged in a way.
Um, 2018, 2019, you got back on the ice regularly. You found the Women's Hockey Club of Toronto. Um, how much has that played a role in your life finding um, WHCT? You identify as a queer, demisexual, lesbian, and how much has that helped you, even from I suppose a personal side of things with your sexuality?
Yeah, I'm extremely fortunate. Like I said, growing up, we was a very close community, and so I didn't know exactly what my identity was until, really university. But that was largely because I was just focused on my sports. So I didn't care to have a relationship to figure that out. And then we're like, oh, also if you add in demisexual, that makes sense why, it was just not there. Like there was no clear like, well, do you think they're attractive with it? And I'm like, I don't know. They're a person. I need something more for me to figure this out. Yeah, that explained a lot more about high school versus me just playing sports. But even within that, my family, my brother didn't, kind of engage with the like compulsory heterosexuality and like compet piece. And so I just kind of always knew that I could be, you know, attracted to whoever. Um, that was an option. Um, but it wasn't it's a thing and I'm gonna have to explain that. It was just that's what it could be. My brother would tease me about like dating and he'd be like, boyfriend or girlfriend. Like he didn't care about that. He just was bugging me that like I wasn't dating anyone and he didn't get it. So, even in that sibling relationship and teasing, it was also still, inclusive. Um and in my high school, like we were open about it all. We joked about, like, oh, this person's a player, but they were gay and slept with all the guys. But like that had nothing to do with it. It was just, making those comments. So, and even in sport, I didn't hear those, homophobic slurs or anything like that. I also, even in terms of like the racism, it wasn't there. Half my team was Asian at times, so I just was really fortunate in the space I was in, and I recognized kind of that bubble I got to live in. My brother, it wasn't like, oh, Vancouver's great. Like my brother very much still in all his sports growing up was hearing those things. And so for me, once I came to, Toronto and kind of figured out, okay, this is where my identity lies. I had made a comment about something and I was like, like the queer community center. I'm like, well, yeah, like this is like, oh, okay. Like it's like, right, I guess I could update you on this fact. Though like they had to know I was something other than just straight. Like I think it was there. Um, but yeah, so that kind of started uh 2016 or so. That I was kind of narrowing it down a bit and figuring that out. But then yeah, when I found the league, I was just the year before I'd gotten back onto Ringette, and that was amazing. I was like, well, let's women's ice hockey Toronto, and the club came up, and I was like, great, awesome. I was like, I can get to this rink on public transit with a goalie bay. That's kind of one of the most important things. They needed goalies, and it was also free to play as a goalie. So I was like, done. You have checked all the boxes. Um, and I joined, and like I knew it was a queer league, but that wasn't really a factor at that point when I joined. Um, I think I kind of took it for granted that I that hasn't been something I really had to worry about or think about. My closest friends were all just queer because we all find each other anyway if we don't mean to. Um, yeah, so I joined and then kind of quickly realized like, oh, there's this real kind of value to that community piece. And that community piece is what shifted that relationship with the sport from, oh, this is a place I get to play hockey and I like it, it's fun, to I come to Saturdays not just to play hockey. Like, regardless of what happens on the ice, even if I have like just a poor game, that community piece, seeing the friends, seeing that is there. Um, and then with our league, it's like individual registration. So after you play a couple seasons, you've played with so many people and across the teams now at this point. Like we go out for drinks afterwards, and people at pretty much every table as the different teams come in after their games. So that also really helps because it really broadens that community. It's not just your one team. Um, and so yeah, like that was something I really took for granted. I've always known the importance of like queer spaces. 100% is needed. Um, I just didn't realize, you know, they're often said, like, oh, we're creating the safe space safer space for people, and we need that. Um, but there's also the piece of like it's just your community. Doesn't matter if you've had positive experiences on your sports, you've been accepted on all your other teams. There's still a value and importance just for having that space. Um, yeah, like one thing I think about is just your average locker room conversation or post game drinks. Um, talking about having kids or something like that. In a queer league, you're more likely to hear about the process of family planning that you have to do, um, and getting to hear how that goes, what the process is, what the experiences are. Where a lot of folks, even if you have super supportive family and friends, if they're all straight, you're not getting that knowledge. You're gonna have to seek that out and find that. Um, so something as simple as that, you're like, right, this is again a value of community, why we need to have these connections. Um, on top of having a safe space where you can play sports, and because I know I'm just fortunate to have not been placed in those situations, but we know that's hockey. We know that's the culture of the sport. So that I also really kind of hold the league in that space, knowing that it's creating this space for the community.
Um, it's been around for 30 years as well. That's quite phenomenal. Yeah, it's an awesome hoodie. Um, how big has the impact been from Women's Hockey Club of Toronto?
Huge. It started as a space for like as a lesbian league, and creating that space for women. Um, and it was, we have this really, prime Saturday night spot that we've held from, now it's 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock start times. Um, I know at one point there was kind of a challenge years ago about like us getting to hold on to that ice time, being like, well, you have to have Toronto residents, and so there was the league. Everyone went in. They're like, here's our postal code. Here's where we live. Like, don't even think about trying to like take this away from us. Um, and so now like we have that space, and that can be hard to get, just for women. Like girls hockey is having that issue where people are like, well, this is how we've always allocated ice. And it's like, yeah, because you've only ever had boys teams. So when we come in and you have it's like, well, you kind of have to give us ice time. So the fact that we've been able to hold this like prime downtown ice time on Saturday evenings is huge. Um, and the league has progressed and has become like a queer, trans, non-binary league. For so we still hold that space. We still have the name is still Women's Hockey Club of Toronto, um, and we're holding that space for queer women, but we are open and inclusive also for trans, non-binary athletes, to play. And so one thing this year is we got funding through like the Maple Leafs Foundation, MLSE, and so we got new jerseys, and we've gone back to like an old logo that just has like WHCT on it, kind of recognizing that transition of the league, and kind of honoring the history of it and that place, while also not making our non-binary and kind of trans math athletes wear a jersey that says women on it, and recognizing that piece. So that's, yeah, like that's huge, to be able to have that space, and as a cis woman, I can't you know fully ever grasp kind of what that experience is for my trans and non-binary friends. Um, I can imagine just thinking of kind of my own space within like a men's league, or when I played co-ed and getting that. So I realize, kind of the special aspect, that this league is able to have, and that I think everyone in our league really protects that space, to make sure that they have that, and we have any issues like very quickly, like you're out if you're going to be transphobic in any way, like you're not welcome here. um and I think that's something pretty special, because I think we all know within queer spaces that doesn't necessarily mean you'll have plenty of LGBT spaces. So being able to have that inclusivity, I think is huge. especially in sports.
Yeah, I totally agree, especially in the current climate for trans people as well. And just something as little in the detail of a jersey, what's written on a jersey, something like that just goes a long way. Um, I know that you're a season ticket holder, or you were a season ticket holder for um, PWHL Toronto, which are now the Scepters. Um, do you think having a strong PWHL will help with allocation for, I suppose, ice time and rinks, etc., actually giving up time for WHCT?
Probably not. um, the the people who are still in power is, the only option I think that it may help is being able to push like city council and things like that, um, to advocate on behalf of, like the women's teams and girls teams to change the process within at least city ranks. Um, but I think, the people who are currently kind of holding that power, like it does nothing for them to give up their ice time. Like they don't benefit from it, unless, maybe they have a daughter and all of a sudden, suddenly they care about it. Well, because my daughter, and I'm like, shouldn't you have just cared anyway from the beginning? But like,
Yeah,
okay, like if it gives us ice time, we'll at least take it. But like that's
yeah,
yeah, not the same. Um, yeah, so I think in that way, being able to see that and have that can help with the push and the publicity around the issue, um, as as it becomes more visible and PW Toronto becomes more visible. Um, but I think it's maybe helpful in that perspective of getting it more public. But I think in terms of that, this team itself having an impact directly on those in power, I I think they've shown their colors. I don't think that's going to change them. But hopefully, it helps with the pressure for them to have to, kind of force their hand. Um, yeah,
yeah. Just fingers crossed, I suppose. It's women's sport, etc., is just growing phenomenally across the world.
yeah.
So they just got to open up their eyes. I think these rinks and old school mentality. Um, I did mention PWHL Toronto. So while I've got you on, they did change their name, or they announced their name. They got some colors and a logo. What are your thoughts on the name and the logo and the colors?
It's embarrassing. Um, like their entire promotion was based on British monarchy and colonization, um, and not just like obscure references to Queen Street and Queen's Quay, which are named after, but actually using the images of them in their promo. Um, like we can't say, oh, this was named at a different time. It's like, no, we're literally in this. You can't post, statements on Day of Truth and Reconciliation or National Indigenous Day and then go and name your team and build your entire branding over the colonization that supposedly you're, you know, trying to engage with Truth and Reconciliation after. Um, and they changed their like blurb that explains their branding once. And I joked to my teammates, I'm like, sounds like they put their original one into ChatGPT and said make it less colonial. And then went in Queen's Key, like center of diversity. Like it was the worst approach. And then they went and changed it a second time to one where they really tried to just push the idea of Scepter as a global, thing. Um, but you're just you can't it's just not something that you can do today. And if you're gonna do it, then do not try and put on this face of truth and reconciliation if you're not actually doing anything about it or you're directly going against it. Like that's the other thing is it's not like, oh, this name could have been like, oh, it's kind of tied. It's like they directly with imagery and explanation said this is why we named it this team is based on colonization. So it's not like, oh, that name, it's kind of similar. Like their entire branding was built on it. and then they just shifted the language of their branding to be like, no, it's not, whilst never addressing it. So like it's just like it's the worst name. It's embarrassing, and so there's the struggle of wanting to support the players, wanting to support the league in concept, not the league in terms of the people making these decisions. But then being stuck with, okay, how do we, it's the same with, Minnesota having Brita Curl. How do we support the need for this league? How do we support the other players in this league while also holding them accountable? That's kind of the hard part about it. So I have a teammate this year on my WHCT team who is making shirts that like rescind the scepter and things to try and be able to challenge this while still supporting the need for a pro women's league. But yeah, it's I would rather have the Ottawa Charge and their logo, which shades them 100%, is just like the updated Calgary Flames logo. Like it's it's I would still take that over our name. Like it's so that's been hard because we were really excited, prepared to spend money and buy another jersey and do like, so I was like, I guess I saved money because I don't have to buy things. Like silver lining for me. I was like, I don't like it's so hard. But yeah, no, I think like the one word, if or anything, is just embarrassing. Like it's it's brutal. So that's the response. So it's, I guess we're used to in sports, especially as women and crew, of having to advocate, and being aware of that part all the time in a sports space. You would hope that this was kind of like your one reprieve where you could just go and enjoy. But we also then, there's your intersection with hockey and sports and racism, and specifically with indigeneity and truth and reconciliation, specifically within that space. That's that is where we are in the world. We can celebrate aspects of inclusivity and other than Brita Curl and in the league and having space for queer athletes and queer fans. But I think that's, again, just a reminder of the whitewashing of pride and that and the transphobia within the community, and recognizing that intersectionality is there, and we can't just ignore that because we've had success in other places.
Yeah, 100%. I did see when the teams are announced, etc. I did see a fair bit of backlash just scrolling online, just seeing some comments from people. So I totally understand where people are coming from in that sense, and totally on board. The one question I ask people before I let them go on this podcast is, what's your proudest moment that you've had within queer hockey?
Would end of last season in WCT, we won our quarterfinals. We tied it up, tied it up with, I think, like just over a minute left. Went to OT and went to shootouts, and I saved the last shot. We won. I stood up, turned around, grabbed my water bottle, got ready to shake hands. Like it was as if it were, the second game of the season. And that was right at the time that I was doing that positive psychology course, and I kind of was like, oh yeah, no, like I just didn't like we tied it. I stopped the shot, like we won and shoot it. Like that should be the moment as a goalie of like, this was great. And I was just like, cool, one and done, kind of focus on to the next game. And so it was after the semifinals. Well, like beforehand, I was like, if we win, like I'm gonna stop and enjoy that moment. We tied it with 28 seconds left or so, and I'm like, can we not do this, but I guess okay. So pull, we tie it, go to OT, go to shootouts, win in shootouts. You know, and I didn't turn around, I didn't grab my water bottle. I, you know, was there, and you know, it was one of my good friends kind of from the league that was like the first person, and one of our teammates partners like was filming that moment, so like got that celebration on camera. Um and so like that was, I think, only really kind of happened because of the community piece within the league for one. Um and then, you know, pretty big therapy win after 20 years of not doing that. So being able to celebrate, you know, a semifinal win and be like, yeah, that's cool. Like, let's do that. And, you know, it doesn't, yeah, like it doesn't matter what happens in the final, like enjoy this moment. Um, so that was, you know, pretty big. Um, then we won the finals too. So that was, yeah, so we won the league last year. But it was still, you know, the semifinal, I think that kind of was a culmination of, I was playing some of my best hockey ever. I have no reason why. I've not trained. I've not done goalie sessions. I just was playing well, and it was great. And having those moments with my teammates to be able to engage and be able to, you know, appreciate that, and be able to make that shift from like a shootout mindset where obviously you have to, yeah, like that was, yeah, pretty big for me. So I think I'll always hold that piece, and you know, that game, that win, pretty close.
I think it's important to celebrate the moments along the way, not just the end result or the final. You have to celebrate those moments along the way to getting to that final spot. So that's really really cool. Uh, is there anything that you want to plug before I let you go? We can chuck some links etc. in the show notes as well. But is there any place that you want people to find you, or anything that you want to plug?
Uh, yeah, I think we can share. You know, obviously I've talked about WHCT, Women's Hockey Club of Toronto. If you're, you know, if you're living in Toronto, one of my teammates started the Toronto Pride tournament. So we just had we're gonna have our third year, kind of next year. So again, if you want to come into Toronto and participate in that, it's amazing. It's been so much fun being able to have that weekend. Um, you can follow me if you're like, what's mental health stuff and you're interested. Sometimes I post things, but nothing special there. And then also the whole, you know, if we can get more voices around, you know, the PWHL Toronto's name and things, I think that's an important piece, if we're going to be, you know, fans of the game, and have a responsibility there. Um, yeah, I think that's, yeah, nothing too special on my end. You know, I live, school, and hockey, so that's kind of it.
Yeah, I'll chuck some links, etc., in our show notes, so people can find it. Obviously, across our socials, when we're promoting the podcast, the episode, we can chuck some links in at a few people, etc. Thank you so much for jumping on and being part of this. I appreciate everyone who gives up their time to have a chat. I feel like we could probably talk for another couple of hours about all sorts of things. Just going through your life has been so massive, and I've tried to fit as much as I could into this episode. But thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for creating the space. I know when it first popped up, I was like, yeah, like this was an easy follow on my recommendations. And then, you know, every time you pop up with a clip and be able to listen to these episodes, yeah, no, really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's really cool. It started off as just something I thought based here in Australia with some inclusive clubs we've got here, and it's just expanded now across to North America, etc. So it's really really cool. And yeah, thank you. I appreciate the positive feedback about the podcast. We are the Pride and Puck podcast. I am Andrew McDougall. That is Mads Cho, or Madeleine Cho. Thank you for joining us. We'll be back next month for the final episode for season 2. But until then, we'll speak to you next time. Ciao.